As Russian President Vladimir Putin pushes forward with his three-year assault on Ukraine, a new study reveals a significant number of soldiers injured or killed. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, there have been nearly 1 million Russian casualties, with nearly half as much for Ukraine. All of this as Russian forces advance further, as we told you yesterday, broke it down by Nick Robertson, into Ukraine's Sumy region. My next guest is Ukrainian Parliament member Kira Rudik, who's here with me in London. Kira, great to have you back on the show. Look, you heard both our correspondents there. Let me start with your reaction to this call between President Putin and President Trump, and words like Nick said that painted in many ways Putin as a victim.
Hello, Isa, and thank you so much for having me here. When I read President Trump's statement, I was just asking one question. Did the leader of the democratic world just give a blessing for Putin's another attack on Ukraine? And I'm just like, this is so absurd, and this is so disgraceful for everyone who is fighting right now, but also for everyone who is watching. And the question is, why are they not more afraid what Russia can do if Ukraine fails? By the way, we don't plan to fail. Yeah. We will continue fighting. We are not going to capitulate. But right now, trying to swap the table and paint Russia as a victim and Ukraine as an aggressor, I'm just like, is it not clear by this moment who is an aggressor and that Ukraine is defending itself? It's like, does President of the United States want to ally with Russia? Because it just doesn't seem right. None of that seems right. And the worst thing, Isa, is that people from the front line will be giving calls and asking the question of what's going on. And there is no good answer to explain to them what is happening and why is the President of the United States is saying what he's saying.
And I bumped into you upstairs just before you came down, and I could see how really visibly angry you were with those words.
Because it's not just some words, because it's basically my life, my relative's life, my neighbor's life is at stake. Every next missile, every next drone attack could be the final one for someone, for people that I love, for me personally. And this is why I'm angry, because if it was in some parallel world and we were just discussing some people, it would be one thing. But it is very real. In Ukraine, everything is very real.
I mean, Nick was saying, our diplomatic editor, you heard him there, Kira, talking about the mixed messaging we're getting from this administration. It's not the first time I've heard it. But, you know, does this sound like a president who is ready to impose sanctions on Russia? Because only 2 weeks ago, I think he said, well, give me 2 weeks to figure it out. Does this sound like a president who's prepared to put a red line, who's prepared to give Russia some stick? Because that does not sound like that to me.
It's another painful matter, Isa, because we have done everything by the book. We have done things that we said that we would never do. We have voted for this rare minerals deal, just giving away our rare minerals. President Zelensky has come to Istanbul, something that he said that he would never do, never negotiate with Putin. We have gone through everything, agreed to a 30-day ceasefire. So President Trump seemed to put pressure on Ukraine, but we have not seen him putting any kind of pressure on Russia. And it's not even mixed messages. It's a very straightforward message, which says, I will negotiate with aggressor and I will put a pressure on a victim. It is not leading us anywhere right now because there has not been any single fact that would prove that Putin wants to end the war. Because you know what these facts would be? He would just stop attacking us, or he would come to a negotiating table. So this illusion that you can agree with Putin on something just exists in the White House right now, or perhaps somewhere else in Kremlin. And this is why it is so painful, because we are losing time, we are losing people, we are losing the ability to get support from the United States. And it just seems such a bad message to all the world, to all the other aggressors who are clearly watching that they can start a full-scale aggression, commit all kinds of the war crimes, and then they can delay and play around. President Trump looks very weak right now because he didn't get anything from Putin as of right now, from what he wanted from him, anything.
Where then does this leave any sort of negotiations? As you heard me saying there, Pete Hegseth wasn't there, the US Defense Secretary wasn't in these talks. You know, Ukraine Defense Minister was there, along with 50 others or so, clearly standing united with Ukraine in terms of Europeans. But What is the message the United States is giving, and where does that leave any sort of ceasefire negotiations? Because, Ukraine has showed up at every single meeting.
Yeah, we have done everything. So I think we need to come back to Munich Security Conference when J.D. Vance was very clear saying that Europe needs to take care of its own security by itself.
Yeah.
So this is where we're going.
Do you think this is where it's going? Do you think the US is going to pull out of this?
Well, let's look at the facts. Yeah. If in 2 weeks or 3 weeks we will get additional package of the military support from US, then I will be wrong. But right now, we don't know if that's going to happen.
But this is what Putin wants, Kira.
Yeah, that's right. And this is why I'm asking why are people not afraid more of what's going to happen? Because again, coming back to the ceasefire question, again, the question is not answered. What will make sure, or who will make sure that Putin will keep his part of the bargain, even if there is a ceasefire? Because since 2014, Issa, we have been in so many ceasefires with them, and it never worked. It led us to the situation when Russia launched full-scale invasion. The only thing that worked for us for the last 11 years was to fight back. And this is what we are doing, and this is what we intend to do. We didn't say we want a negotiation and we believe in ceasefire. This was an illusion coming from the White House. And right now, this illusion is just breaking down.
Breaking down, Ukraine, though, has been fighting back quite ferociously, showing that it still has cards to play. Kira, really appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much indeed.
Russia's Vladimir Putin tells Donald Trump he plans to respond to Ukraine's recent attacks. This is what we know. The US president has an ominous warning, really, for Ukraine, just days after Kyiv's audacious attack on Moscow's strategic bombers. That operation also apparently coming as a surprise to the US. Donald Trump says his call with Vladimir Putin lasted about 75 minutes. On social media, Trump writes, it was a good conversation, but not a conversation that will lead to immediate peace. President Putin did say, and very strongly, they'll have to respond to the recent attack on the airfields. The Kremlin confirms President Putin also held a, quote, constructive conversation with Pope Leo XIV earlier today. Nick Robertson is here with us. Just on the response from Russia, presumably you're not surprised by that.
No, it does seem that President Putin is on a sort of a charm offensive, because apparently during his conversation with the Pope, he talked about how he was trying to reunite these many thousands of children that Ukraine says have been taken to Russia illegally. In fact, there's a war crimes charge against President Putin based on this. But he told the Pope, apparently, according to the Kremlin, that they were working hard to try to reunite these families. It was... In the way that the Kremlin presents it, it does seem that it was a sort of a charm offensive. Having the Kremlin already said, well, the Vatican isn't a good place to host peace talks between Ukraine and Russia, when for a while that had seemed like the thing to do. And I think when you move on and look at the conversation with President Trump, again, as you're saying there, Trump has a habit of echoing the person he last spoke to. And by saying... Putin told me I have to respond to Ukraine's audacious drone strikes on Russia's bomber fleet over the weekend. It was absent any of the language that said, and I told him, there's a better way. I told him, let's go for peace, or I told him this. It was absent to that. And then when you listen to some of the other things the Kremlin said about the call, which is blaming Ukraine for the breakdown in talks, accusing Ukraine of terrorism for blowing up a couple of railway bridges last weekend. Civilians inside Russia, when this happened, were injured and killed. But I think for those in Kyiv and who study the Kremlin's position closely, it will ring hollow that the Kremlin is accusing Ukraine of terrorism for killing civilians when Russia does that day by day, night by night.
In terms of progress, as you say, you use the word absent. Has Donald Trump stepped back from this? I mean, what was the call about? It doesn't seem to be pushing for a deal in his language in the same way as he was.
Yeah, one of the interesting things, this has been a day of two parts. The early part of the day was all about NATO and the US representatives there, the defense ministers meeting for tomorrow, and not present at the Ukraine defense contact group there. But we did hear from the US ambassador to NATO saying hugely important that NATO nations all give 5% of GDP towards their defense spending, because that's the requirement The reason given is because the Kremlin is ramping up its military preparations and NATO needs to stay ahead of that. So it's sort of contradictory messages. And you also had, of course, Mark Rutte, the Secretary General at NATO, setting this up and saying, absolutely, this is going to be a big push. We have to equip more. We have to get our ammunition ready faster. He pointed to the fact that Russia, on 1/25 of the GDP of NATO, Russia produces 4 times the amount of ammunition in a quarter of the time. I mean, the stats were shocking, the way that the NATO leadership and the US representative presenting them. So on the one hand, in the morning, it's all about NATO needing to do more because Russia is a huge threat. Yet at the end of the day, you have the US president sounding sympathetic to Russia.